up, internet? It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Paris multi-instrumentalist James Kent, aka Perturbator. Perturbator's new album, Age of Aquarius, will be released on October 10th via Nuclear Blast Records. On the sixth and latest Perturbator album, Age of Aquarius, James Kent's first for the renowned metal label Nuclear Blast, he offers up a more propulsive spin on his moody early work, showcasing his most confident, painfully beautiful and thematically refined music to date. Where his previous album, 2021's Lustful Sacraments, was about bad habits and addiction, Age of Aquarius explores how individualism, conflict and war are interrelated and dominant societal forces, both brutal and sublime. The album feels like the musical equivalent of a scream into the existential void. His ballistic, militaristic sound dovetails with his thematic focus on human aggression, which manifests itself throughout Age of Aquarius. We have this climate nowadays of people getting divided over everything, Kent says. Every debate is two-sided, very extreme, very warlike, and people are very into group thinking. There's this side of the conflict, and then there's this side of the conflict, and if you're not on my side, you're wrong. Bleak and blunt, yes, but expectedly so from an album that starts with a song called Apocalypse Now. Kent intentionally chooses his very evocative song titles since most of his tracks lack lyrics and primarily convey mood through instrumentals. I like to think of every album as a movie, he says. The tracks are all scenes from that one big movie. The first half of Age of Aquarius is all about conflict, reveals James, the misanthropy and violence that lays in all of us. The second part of the album then talks about individualism, understanding that group thinking leads to nowhere, and having your own free will is the single most essential thing we have in life. All tracks were written, performed and produced by James Kent, with mixing and mastering also done by the main man himself. The album is 11 tracks long, clocks in just over 1 hour. So, first album on Nuclear Blast. Which is not like completely surprising, to be fair. Like, I've seen a bit of a rise recently in kind of electronic industrial artists being added to the rosters of more kind of metal labels recently. Probably only a matter of time before this happened. But you know, just like the kind of the GOST kind of acquisition by Century Media and then moving to Metal Blade, I was kind of interested to see if this would this trigger a change in like the Perturbator sound at all? I know like GOST certainly added some new kind of strings to his bow in the last couple of albums, so I did wonder. But yeah, I do think even before like this like moves to Nuclear Blast, Perturbator had kind of already started to kind of transition the sound ever so slightly. Like I think the material kind of post maybe the Uncanny Valley, I think it's probably been a bit more cinematic. There's been like more elements of like post-punk and kind of goth kind of character coming into it, and like same with like adding kind of more kind of guests doing vocals and stuff like that as well. I think as they did, his last album was 2021, but he did an album in 2022 maybe, I think, called Final Light, which was like a kind of collab project with Johannes from Cult of Luna. So it was like something a little bit different. It was quite cool. Like more kind of like an industrial post-metal kind of sound, which was quite an interesting one. But technically, it wasn't a Perturbator standalone. You know, it was like a more kind of experimental release, so it probably wasn't like classed as an actual Perturbator album. This is his new album though, which does also contain some guests. Features guest vocals from Ulver, Alcest, Greta Link, and Author and Punisher. Yeah, it's been a wee minute since I've listened to Perturbator, not gonna lie. I think at one point I probably had my finger right on the pulse with like, you know, what was happening in that scene and who was new and what was going on, and then it just became like
Yeah.
oversaturated.
The kind of synthwave thing like hit another level.
Yeah.
And then there was a clear divide on who, as alternative and metal and all the other stuff, reviewers considered people we could talk about, and those who fell on the other side of that, who were like that, nah, that's not for us. That's different reviewers. And Perturbator has always, for me, straddled that line ever so finely. Where like you will listen to half the album like that. I don't even know if we would constitute this anything other than a kind of synthwave electronica. And then other stuff where like you mentioned before, you get that kind of post-punk vibe that comes in, something a little bit darkened, and you're like that, all right, that's totally this side of the fence. So he's always kind of straddled that, like yourself. I don't think I've listened to anything new by Perturbator. I didn't even know that he'd done that collab until you mentioned it there. And I'm like that, when you were mentioning it, I was like, that sounds like something I should check out. So
I'd lost a bit of interest in it. I think because there were so many artists doing it, and like a lot of them were using a lot of the same like synth sounds and drum samples, and it became this point where it was like lots of clones of the kind of like the same thing. And then there was like a handful of artists that were like still trying to like evolve their sound. And I feel like Perturbator has always been in that kind of that lane.
But he was at the forefront of the increased interest of synthwave. So there's a lot of people that are trying to ebb Perturbator as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
The other thing about him is he tours a lot. And what's always been interesting about him is that after those tours, a little bit of whoever he's toured with rubs off into his sound. So it doesn't surprise me that there's a collab with Author and Punisher. They've toured together, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So, Age of Aquarius, what do you think? What do you make of this? Like not having listened to them for a little while. What do you make of this one?
It's too long. So let me get that out of the way. And this is coming from a synth guy.
Yeah.
Right. That's my bread and butter. It is too long. It's got grand ideas, like lofty ideas, and I applaud it for that. And actually, in him discussing his approach to songs as being like sim tracks, I think that's the pro and the con of this. Whereas, like you listen to Leatherteeth by Carpenter Brut, that is a sim track to a movie, right? And that's 30 minutes long, right?
Yeah.
So this feels like almost a score. Each song is a score for a movie. So as a result, you kind of feel like you're getting a lot of bang for your buck, let's put it that way. And it's never at any point uninteresting. I just felt like the flow of the album didn't sync up sometimes. And at other times it was totally locked in.
Yeah.
He also, in this one particularly, uses a really interesting technique of kind of finishing songs ahead of the end of the track and then kind of introducing something that will take you to the next track, which sometimes pays off really well and other times is quite frustrating, and that you could be sitting on about 30 seconds of kind of down before the next song, and once that's hit a couple of times it's less remarkable than had it been used sparingly on the album. I will say this, the collabs that he's brought in are absolutely brilliant. The song Apocalypse Now, which kicks off the album, which features Ulver, is a great kickoff. It sets the stage, great vocal performance, really sinks in, gives you that kind of synth wavy 80s vibe. Really, really, really cool. Like you mentioned before, kind of post-punky. It is awesome. And also, there are moments where that track genuinely gets dark, where kind of almost kind of full dubstep breakdown section, which is really, 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 really cool. That follows really nicely into Lunacy, which is the first like pure Perturbator instrumental track on here, which follows on really nice. It kind of picks up the pieces, it's dark, it's intricate, weaves around a lot. The opening track is 6 minutes. The second track is just close to 5 minutes. So you're 11 minutes with 2 songs, right? And then you follow up with Venus, which features Author and Punisher, which is another 6 minute song. And on my first listen through, I was very conscious of how long songs were going. What's cool about the Author and Punisher guest appearance here is Tristan's doing more of the stuff that we got on the previous Author and Punisher albums, that kind of gothy, kind of spoken, slightly sung melody. It fits really, really, really cool on the track. Gives it a little bit. But what's interesting is the stuff in the background is like a less aggressive Author and Punisher. Like the percussion has those kind of kinetic like punch hits from the with that, but they're not using the same kind of your toolbox falling down a flight of stairs. You know, like gears trapping a man's arm sort of sounds. You know what I mean? They're kind of, there's a softer approach there. The synths are a lot more warmer and inviting because it's Perturbator and not Author and Punisher. So I love that collab. The Glass Staircase is the next song. This is where it started to get like, oh, this track's a bit long. It's a really, 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 really cool track. Like in terms of like the synth work, I kind of love it. Builds and it like takes its time to build. The track builds for what must be close to like 2 minutes before it properly kicks in with a beat. And when it kicks in, it reminded me a lot of like Carpenter Brut. It's got that kind of pulsing like rhythm. You just kind of want to like do a bit of strut to, bang your head to. It's really fucking cool. Even the synth sims as well are kind of slightly choral and once again reminded me a little bit of Carpenter Brut. But it builds up to that moment and then really settles down for quite some time before it builds up. Like a soundtrack. Like if John Carpenter was scoring like Escape from New York, this might be what he's doing, but also at the same time, there'd be visual things to keep me engaged. And in this one, there ain't those visual things and there ain't no vocals here. So I started kind of languishing a little bit on, right, are we going to bring this back? And it does. It like ebbs and flows in a really interesting way. But by the time you get to the end where you're getting rapid drums and like something like uber cinematic with a kind of climax, it does feel like it's taken a while to get there. And then kind of Hanover Square kind of closes out the what would be nominally the first side, I'm assuming, of the Davey might buy a vinyl. And it's a good way to close out. It like loads of atmosphere, kind of feels like a quieter moment in a movie. Kind of fits that kind of hangover quote unquote vibe where you just don't want anything aggressive or loud in your ears. And then picks up pace on the second half with The Art of War, which is like to see this live would be fucking great, but it sticks to the rules. It's like single length, it's 3 minutes 40, knows what it needs to do, gets in, gets out. Lady Moon, which is another collab, so it has Greta Link in it, a 7 minute song. Whilst I love the performances, the track goes on too long and there's no getting around it. It's followed by The Swimming Pool, which once again locks in that single length. Really cool, really interesting, super atmospheric. Thought it was brilliant. And then you get like the kind of 1-2 punch at the end with Moore's Ultima Ratio, which is a brilliant build into Age of Aquarius, which is a closing track with Alcest. The closing track is 10 minutes long, right? And I'll be honest, as much as I like the performances, it feels 10 minutes long. I don't know if it merits the length of a closing song. I don't know if it necessarily brings, for the title song, I don't know if it cinematically brings all the themes of the album together, which you tend to find with instrumental or synth work pieces. The closing track is usually that way to take all the motifs and all the ideas and all the sims and bring finality. I don't think this one actually does that all that well. It's not, once again, there's nothing bad on here at all. It's all very well composed and very well constructed, but I was very aware that sections were going on a bit longer than they probably should. And what I didn't have, which other instrumental bands or other synthwave bands have done in their press, which I didn't read, but they usually get there's usually a theme. So like I mentioned before, with Carpenter Brut, you got the clear theme of this is a soundtrack to a movie. The movie is like a cheesy 80s like horror movie. Do with that what you will, and you listen to it and it totally works and it totally fits all that. Or I'm thinking about even when we checked out that last Zombie album and whether or that, it's, you know, it's a big old soundtrack and, you know, you listen to it and you got the movements in the movie and I could picture things around and the titles kind of evoked what was going on. There seems to be a slight disconnect here on this album and I can't quite put my finger on why, because on paper this is like made for me, you know what I mean? It has all the elements that I love. It's epic, it's like very score orientated, which I love when it comes to instrumental music, and it's very well composed. there's just something not quite grabbing me here, and I don't know if there's maybe not enough aggression on it. I was surprised when you mentioned about like the press saying that this is really the yin and the yang, the us and them, the idea of conflict. There's some of that on here, but there isn't. I blind listening to that, I did not get that at all. I didn't get the idea of like friction or conflict there. To me, the tracks kind of resolved themselves in the way that I kind of thought they would. Sometimes it took a bit longer to get there. It's worth saying the production is immaculate, but Perturbator has never struggled with immaculate productions. It's very well produced, very well put together. The lulls are accompanied by heavier moments, but nothing becomes overpowering, nothing in the red. It fits and it sounds refined and it sounds polished, like someone has spent time on this, making sure all the bits fit together. So, in terms of a debut on Nuclear Blast, I don't know if I think it's the greatest debut. I personally think Perturbator's put out better stuff. But I would say, like the opening statement of him being at his most confident, he clearly is here.
Yeah.
He's put out a long form album and he's put everything into all of those songs. So, weirdly, I think in isolation, listening to certain songs, this album works really, really, really well for me. I think as a whole album, it's just a bit too long for my liking. There are bits where I think we could try and be a little bit more daring, which we're not. Especially this late in his career. So yeah, I feel like my review sounds like I'm being more negative than my score will reflect. I don't know what I was necessarily expecting, and I don't think it's bad. I think it's on point. I think if you're a Perturbator fan, this is going to tick a lot of the boxes. You're going to be happy, and he's continued that upward trajectory throughout his career. He's on a nice big label who'll put him out with a load of interesting tours, and he'll do a lot of work there, but that's once again never been an issue with him. So I'm flapping about the place here trying to articulate that I am marginally disappointed, but there's still a lot to keep me happy. How about you? How did you get on?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I kind of struggled to put this one, or like put words to this like album of what I think about it. Because there are things that I really like about it, and there's other things that don't quite work for me. I feel like this is definitely a continuation of the newer Perturbator sound for the most part, but it's also a little bit collaborative, so you've got like a couple additional flavors in there. I think for fans of like the old kind of like hardened, kind of more aggressive Perturbator, there's not a huge amount of that in there. There's a couple of little throwback moments here, like, oh, right, okay, I remember that, but there's not a lot of that, so I don't know how the kind of fans of that older stuff will feel. Okay, I'll start with what kind of worked. I quite liked this kind of thematically and conceptually. I thought it did really well with this. I think that the dark mood of this album pairs very well with the themes of existential dread and societal unrest and conflict. And that appears pretty early on in the kind of opening track, Apocalypse Now. It had that kind of feeling of like something getting pushed closer to the brink for me. The synth work on that track is awesome. Like, as you said, very 80s in its chord choices, but there's like a kind of ominous kind of undertone to it. And that feeling kind of ramps up as the track goes on. And then you're into kind of Lunacy, which really kind of like stacks up those like really like kind of pound and kick drums. It's got these kind of really mechanical industrial elements. It reminded me of like something from like a Terminator movie when I was listening to it. But you can hear there's like these kind of like shifts in mood throughout the album, which are kind of to kind of guide you through the arc of it. The arrangements do get quite cinematic in places. Like you said, like there are parts of this that definitely feel movie-like a kind of dystopian kind of movie where, each track has this kind of different feel to a different scene. And, those are all kind of trying to build into the overall narrative. Some tracks are like not overly complex at all. Like there are tracks on here that are just kind of either used to kind of transition apart on the album or to shift the mood. It's just kind of all ambient and atmospheric, set the scene, you know what I mean? Like Hangover Square being an example of that. It's a really cool build into Art of War, which that track gave me like 90s Blade vibes at times. But then obviously he's bringing in guys like Tristan from Author and Punisher, which is clever. It shows another side to the album. But we have Tristan's kind of vocal style, more kind of slightly kind of doomier tendencies, a different texture. And as do like tracks like Lady Moon, which has a more kind of haunting, kind of ethereal vibe, courtesy of Greta Link, but still with a very kind of heavy 80s electronica backdrop. So, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of tied together very well. I didn't feel like it was overly kind of fragmented. There was something that was kind of tying it. I feel like he's thought about kind of tones and which chords kind of like evoke those feelings from the themes that he's using on the album. And I do feel like there is more kind of refinement to the songwriting on this release, more than I've heard from Perturbator in the past. There's like a little bit more attention to detail, but also like knowing when just to kind of pull back and not overload a track with like too many sounds and layers. So eventually it kind of loses effect. I think at one point where if there's too much there. I actually think some of the ambient kind of stripped back stuff works really well. Like just giving you those kind of moments of to catch your breath or like a little bit of kind of reflection. So for me, like there are a lot of positives on Age of Aquarius. You can tell he's put a lot of thought into this one. In terms of the kind of theme and the mood and all that sort of stuff, and having those guests placed in the album in particular places to give it a bit more of a kind of hook in terms of like adding in some vocals. On the other side of that, if I am completely honest about this, it didn't really excite me all that much. After my first listen, I felt kind of flat. So like I was like, okay, I'll give that a day. Maybe I'm not in the right frame of mind. Maybe my mood is just not quite fitting with this album. So gave it a couple of days. And I'm now at like 4 listens to the album. And every time I finish it, I'm never really desperate to play it again. I think it has moments that I really enjoy. This album has highlights on it. And I think actually the first like 3 tracks are really good.
Yeah, the first 3 tracks are like back to back, just fucking great. So.
And then after that, I feel like I'm kind of in and out of the album.
Meanders.
The length does play into that a little. I think this is about 15 minutes too long.
I agree with that. Yeah,
it does feel a little bit draggy in places. I'm not overly fussed in the production.
I like the production.
I think it's good. I like a lot of the sounds he's used, and it's varied in tone and texture and stuff. But I don't know, kind of like the album that didn't really like.
Are you looking for, because it is very soft, the production?
It is very soft.
And are you looking for something a bit edgier?
I think with some of the kind of themes that he's talking about, I think a slightly harder production might have been better. I just feel like it's lacking like vibrancy or like just
it needs a visual element.
A bit of
you know what I mean?
It
needs something for purchase. Like those moments where it's building up to something. I need something in front of me which is like dragging, like some compelling story arc which is dragging me in because the instrumentation isn't. You know what I mean? It's building to something, but it's building in the way that someone walks up a flight of stairs holding a bag. There's not it's not the most riveting story, but I feel like it should be. If I was watching this and like 2 boats were slowly coming together, like almost about to crash, or like planets were about to collide, there would be something epic where the music behind it would drive me into it. But I don't have that element. I have what he has here, and that's not enough.
I don't know. I think he's done more kind of dominant productions in the past, so maybe it's unfair to compare this because he's maybe going for something completely different style wise in the production. But again, it just felt a little bit flat for me. I liked bits of this album, but I didn't love this album overall. I'm not entirely sure how much I'll come back to it based on like the 4 listens I've given to it so far. The length is quite kind of off-putting as well for me. It's just far too long. I don't know. It's one of those albums I just found it really difficult to kind of like put into words how I really kind of like feel about it. Although we've managed to talk about it for 25 minutes, but
we'll try to find ones.
Final thing. Score. What would you rate Age of Aquarius?
I'm at 3.5. Like I say, I can't get the purchase that I want.
Yeah.
The songs have moments where I'm like locked in. There are certain tracks which I think really, really work. Like we mentioned, those opening 3 tracks are just fucking great.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of gets a little bit lost for me. And then it brings me back, and then I get a little bit lost again.
Yeah.
I can't say as an album it works fully for me. But, you know, I don't dislike anything here. I just wish I liked him more. So 3.5.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. 3.5 as well. And pretty much exactly what you just said, to be honest. Perturbator, Age of Aquarius, comes out on October 10th on Nuclear Blast. I'll put all the links below to the band and the pre-order and stuff so you can check out. Let us know what you think. What's your thoughts on this? I'm happy to hear your opinions on this one.
If you're an old school Perturbator, like if you're a hardcore Perturbator fan, let us know in the comments where this sits. Because like Dave said, we were there mid-2010s and then we checked out for a while. This might actually make sense. Like there may be more in here that we're just missing. Let us know. Where does it rank for you? Are you happy, sad, glad, bad? Who's bad?
That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
My heart's grown cold.